everybody, welcome back to my channel again. So just a few days ago we spoke about part 1 and we covered a few slides. Just once again, if you haven't watched part 1, it would be recommended that you watch part 1 so that you kind of get the flow of the video. In this second part, we're finishing off this poem in a very brief manner, just for everybody to kind of have a sense of what the poem is speaking about. Once again, we don't do practice questions in the YouTube channel itself. If you would like to go through a more extensive and secure a higher grade at your DSC and you want more practice, you can always feel free to send me an email and we can go from there. Other than that, in today's video we will be specifically looking into Like Rain It Sounded Till It Curved by Emily Dickinson, part 2. Emily Dickinson, part 2. And in today's specific video, we will be covering off the poem. So it goes in this way. Like rain it sounded till it curved, and then I knew 'twas wind. It walked as wet as any wave, but swept as dry as sand. When it had pushed itself away to some remotest plain, a coming as of hosts were heard. It filled the wells, it pleased the pools, it warbled in the road. It pulled the spy goat from the hills and let the floods abroad. It loosened acres, lifted seas, the sights of centers stirred, then like Elijah rode away upon a wheel of cloud. So there's a few definitions just for anybody who might not be familiar with a few terminologies, and that's completely fine. So one of those is remotest. So remotest just means it comes from the word remote. It just means something that's extremely far away and extremely distant. Warbled, as it's kind of mentioned on the left side of the screen, is like when you're singing softly with a succession of changing notes. So you're singing, but you're also having that little slight change as you go with your singing of notes. Spy goat is so it's kind of like, you think about this in the hills, you may have certain tabs, or you can have some kind of mechanic device that lets you control the flow of liquid. Okay, anything that lets you control the flow of liquid is a device called spy goat. You could also search a few images from Google. I should have maybe left a few pictures here, but nevertheless, you can go on Google and you can search a few images there. Stirred means when you're moving something slightly. So as soon as you move something slightly, even if it's the slightest motion, it's called as stirred. Wells is where we have water that is immersed. Pools, simply swimming pools. That's kind of how I interpret it as. Now, Elijah, he is a prophet, and he helped people to realize the Lord is who people should worship, and he helped to save a religion. A prophet is someone who predicts a few future outcomes. Now, whether that's right or wrong, it depends on the prophecy that's been made, but usually a prophet's the one who makes more or less an accurate prophecy about the future outcome. So I obviously had thoughts on the poem that I've kind of mentioned, but before I go into it, I just want us to discuss about it, and then you can go ahead and understand my thoughts. So as we go through this, it says, like rain, it sounded till it curved. Notice, it's not rain itself. We're saying that it's like rain, like people may totally neglect the idea that we said the word like. Whenever you say something is like another thing, it's a kind of comparison that you're kind of working around with. Now, whether that's a similarity or if that's a difference is of course something that's left to the reader itself. But we're saying that some kind of object is like the rain, and it sounded like the rain till it curved. So when I think about this, I'm just going to go ahead and continue first, and then it says, and then I knew 'twas wind. So it's the way things have been written. Again, Dickinson was born in the 1830s, so it's possible that the difference in the centuries, the difference in the era, can be quite as well a contributing factor to the way things are said. So when we speak about this, you need to look very carefully. Here it says, then I knew, and I interpret this as, in today's English, we call this as new, right? So it's just the fact, I'm going to also go ahead and thicken my writing here, but just so you can see, I suspect it's the way things were said in the past, but I see the relevancy here. And 'twas can be interpreted as that was. So you can see here that, in fact, in these two lines, Emily was comparing wind and rain against each other. And she's basically saying that what she thought was rain was actually wind, and she figured it out all the way up until it curved. So curved could be highlighting some change in direction. Okay? Some kind of change in direction. It walked as wet as any wave, but swept as dry as sand. That's very interesting, right? So it seems like when it walks, it has a very huge impact. It's very interesting that she calls wind as something that can walk, and this makes me suspect if wind is in fact a symbol for something. Like, is it a symbol of a particular thing? We're not too sure yet, but let's go ahead and continue reading on here. So it says, it walked as wet as any wave. Interesting. So when she says the word wet, it means that it makes a noticeable impact, okay? Because wet is something that you can feel, you can touch, you can notice. So it's some kind of noticeable effect, okay? But swept as dry as sand. So it seems that now that when it's going in a little bit of a fast pace, because when you imagine sweep and when you compare sweep and walk, so if you compare sweep and walk, now in my perspective, sweep is much more faster than the behavior of the walk, right? And this kind of indicates to me that when the wind goes a little bit more faster, it's sweeping as dry as sand. So it's almost as if something's unnoticeable now because it's dry. Maybe you won't feel it as much, right? Because dry is kind of like the default for human beings. You won't feel it dry unless it's an extreme dryness that you're experiencing, where you then would need some kind of moisturizer. Now I'm talking about skin here, but anyways, it's dry. To me, this seems something that's maybe not as noticeable as wet. Okay, let's go ahead here. When it pushed itself away to some remotest plain, a coming as of hosts were heard. So notice the word here, pushed, right? Look at that connotation. So it's not something that's gentle. So when I think of the word pushed, I don't think of it as gentle. Now notice, as I'm speaking about this poems, I'm writing my ideas around the poem, and this entire process is called as annotation. And this is what you should be doing essentially when you work with your poems. You need to annotate. You need to try and collect your ideas and kind of put them together in the poem itself. So here you're going to see that it pushed itself away to some remotest plain. So when you say something's being pushed, it's no longer gentle. You're kind of forcing its so basically we're saying the wind is forcing itself to some remotest plain. So it's going somewhere far away from its actual destination or from its actual main location, right? So it's going far away from its main location. Now you, of course, when you annotate, you can be very descriptive. You can use a lot of colors. For me, it's just that because I have a very concise, small little space, I'm just trying to fit things in for you to get the main idea. Now it says, a coming as of hosts were heard. Now this tells me that when you say something's coming on as of hosts or coming as of hosts, it means a huge amount. So here we're saying that the wind is in fact very powerful. And why do I say that? I'm talking about in terms of quantity, because it's a huge amount, we're saying. It filled wells, it pleased pools, it warbled in the road. So notice the choice of words, right? So in some places it just filled the wells, okay? So the wind filled the wells. So notice, wells are usually filled with water, but now it's being filled with wind. It pleased the pools, so there's some kind of emotion. It made the pools happier for some reason, not sure why, right? And then it warbled in the road. So there is a moderate emotion, filled. There is a pleasure or pleased emotion. And then there is some kind of like not as great or not as pleasant emotion of being warbled. So the wind contributed in three kind of different ways. It pulled the spy goat from the hills. So if you think about it, spy goat's kind of the one that controls the flow of the liquid, right? So it's some kind of, you can almost say, control of water. But as soon as you kind of pull the spy goat from the hills, it's kind of like you're pulling that limit of control of water. So now you will notice that water is flowing seamlessly because there's no kind of control that's being set on that water anymore. So that's why you'll notice that it says it let the floods abroad. So it's nice because there's a sense of release of water, right? There's no kind of limitation to it. But because of that, you'll notice the floods were sent abroad. So they kind of went, you can almost kind of say that they went out of control, or you can say they had an uncontrollable nature. Okay, just moving forward, it loosened acres, lifted seas. So you'll notice that loosen acres just means that because when you have water come in, it makes your soil's texture a little bit more an ease. It makes it more moist, which is why it kind of loosens the roots, you could almost say, right? It loosens the core roots that must have been there for years. So it loosens the core roots that have been there for years. Lifted seas, so you can see it's lifted. It's a positive kind of connotation, right? So you're lifting something up. The sights of centers stirred, then like Elijah rode away upon a wheel of cloud. So the sights of center, something that has a very core foundation, it stirred. And then just like Elijah, the prophet who rode away upon a cloud, a wheel of cloud. Now, when I kind of read this poem, I of course want you to pause this video before I go ahead and share my interpretation. But once you kind of feel that you maybe have some ideas in terms of the most straightforward way of understanding it, I want you to think of it on a deeper level. What do you think might be the message from Dickinson? Why is she kind of mentioning all these weird, estranged kind of visual representation? And when I thought about it a little bit more, I interpreted wind as a kind of, you can say, ideas or the emotional thought. And why is that? Because when I see it, for me, wind is like an emotional thought, a opinion, or you could say a change in mindset. So, what I kind of see here is the wind didn't make sound until it curved. So, until it changed its direction. So, you could almost think of it, okay, that um, everybody's mindset or an ideology doesn't make a sound, or it doesn't make a chaos in the society up until it's straying away from the ideal um, ideology in the society. Once someone's opinion is kind of deviated from what's ideal or what's considered ideal, once it kind of goes in an opposite direction from what everyone else's common direction is, it starts to make that sound, right? And that's kind of, to me, it clicked. I was like, there is a potential possibility that, in fact, wind represents a symbol of opinion or a mindset or an ideology that's different, something that's different from the society. And only then something like that would make a sound. Only then something like that would bother the more massive part or population of the society. And you'll notice that when some ideas, okay, when they just take their small little space of mini steps, when they just walk, okay, they start to have some noticeable effect. So when a new idea or a new opinion kind of takes its first few steps of being voiced out or being raised, that's when it makes some kind of, you know, discomfort, you could say, in the society. But then, slowly on with years and years, it goes in a fast-paced way and it sweeps. It almost changes everyone else's opinion, and that's why that change happens in a very silent and quick manner, which is why it's as dry as sand. And you'll notice here it says, when it had pushed itself away to some remotest plain, a coming as of hosts were heard. So you can see here, it kind of, to me, it felt like opinions could go onto the most farthest place on earth. It is possible if it is being pushed or if it's being as loud. So when an opinion is loud enough, when a methodology or when an ideology is raised up loud enough and it makes sense, and it's being raised by a large number of people, even places that are very far away from that actual place where an opinion's being changed, it will be heard. And to me, that makes sense, right? In today's world, if there's a specific opinion that's being raised out in a specific country, even if you're in the other part of the world, you will be able to hear this because it's being pushed on through social media, it's being pushed on through mass media, it's being pushed on by the strong, true opinions of people. And then it says, it filled wells, it pleased pools, and it warbled in the road. So, for some people, that opinion can be pleasing. For some people, it can cause discomfort, so it warbles in the road. And to some people, it can be a moderate opinion, so it just fills you up with some ideas, it fills you up with some thoughts, some change that it's starting to bring in. Then you'll notice that it pulled the spy goat from the hills and let the floods abroad. It loosened acres, lifted seas. Now, in this part of the stanza, to me it feels like a spy goat's a limit. It's something that's restricting the source of water. However, once these new ideas gets pushed in, one's opinion starts to form, it pulls out something that might be wrong or pulls out some kind of control that's restricting the human freedom. And once it does that, it lets the floods abroad. Now, letting them abroad can be seen as a great thing because there is a sense of freedom that's being pushed across, but on the other hand, it can be also a destructive way because when you let the floods abroad, it could lead to massive destructions, right? So that for me could seem like a duality that I could observe when I thought of wind as a kind of opinion, mindset, or ideology. And then you'll notice here it says the sights of censers stirred, then like Elijah rode away upon a wheel of cloud. So from this you'll notice that, when we have strong opinions like this, it could even shake the most foundational pieces of opinions that must have been formatted since years and years and years. And at some point, it then feels like a replicative situation where Elijah rode away from the wheel of cloud, essentially. So this is kind of how I interpreted this specific poem. And I obviously had some ideas here written down that I will, in fact, leave for you to kind of read. But just to kind of go through, and a lot of these thoughts that I've kind of mentioned here is very similar to the one that I've recently mentioned. So it's more or less the same idea. So in the second paragraph, you'll notice again that I mentioned the wind was considered as a coming as of hosts to indicate that it is many elements that are put together that is leading to an event of filling in the wells, the pools, pleasing the pools, and warbling the road. The wind was so powerful that it was able to pull the spy goat from the hills. We have seen what spy goat means, which is basically where water is released from this device. You can think of this as a metaphor where river flow is being paused and unpaused from the vegetation around it. Now that the spy goat is released, the device which we assume to be the vegetation is released. Since the vegetations were pulled out of their place, the water was set free, so the floods occurred, right? So this is something that I've also mentioned while I was speaking about the poem itself. There's a few other pointers that I kind of mentioned here. I think we should place a huge emphasis on how some of these words are capitalized. I will leave it up to you to kind of interpret why might those be capitalized. Is there a specific reason? Did Dickinson kind of capitalize all of them to indicate that each of them don't mean what they actually mean and there's a symbol behind them? Is that the case, or does it just mean something else? Then just moving forward here, you're just going to notice that in the second paragraph, I mentioned that wind, or if you symbolize it as a change that's being brought to the society, has also made its way to the remotest plains, which indicates that change can lead to the furthest place that one can know of, right? So with change, that's something powerful, true, and needed. It will travel and it will make its way to the furthest places. It will make its way to be voiced out as well. Now, over here, just in the second paragraph, the storm can be seen that comes from the inner storm of thoughts of people and how these thoughts can shift the sights of centers. And as this wind turns into a host, which is you could see as a large number, it leads to changes being made in the world. Note that changes that were made in the poem by the wind were no damaging changes, but rather positive changes to make the world a better place. Now, to me, it's very interesting as a reader, how did Emily kind of come up with this poem, and it's still relevant to the world that we live in today, right? So was there something else that she was trying to symbolize when thinking about the wind? Or maybe as a reader, could you think about something else that the wind could be symbolizing? Now, I will leave that question to you for you to think about. I really hope that you've enjoyed this little interpretation that I've kind of shared here for you all. And if you have particular questions, or even if you would like to discuss a little bit more and you want to initiate that, you can always feel free to comment down in the section below, and I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. At the same time, if there's any other poems that you would like me to cover in the DSE syllabus or in any other literature syllabus, feel free to mention it down in the comment section below, and I'd be more than happy to cover anything else. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next vlog. Take care. Bye-bye.